Well, on to more breaking news coming in. This one in relation to the National Herald case probe. We are told that more searches will be carried out at the Herald house now. In this regard, we are told that Kharge has also been asked to be present so that the searches can be carried out by the Enforcement Directorate. The searches will be completed in presence of Kharge, we are told. So ED will be carrying out more searches in relation to the National Herald scam case. The searches will be conducted in presence of Mallikarjun Kharge, the Congress MP. We'll go across to our reporters as well to get us more information. So trouble there only mounting for the Congress leaders. And well, it's not just the Gandhis. Now Kharge, who's now been asked to be present so that the searches can be conducted. We have our senior editor, Shravan, also joining us. Shravan, if you could give us the latest details that you're picking up. Shravan, if you can hear us, if you could give us the latest that you're learning. We understand that Kharge has been asked to be present so that the searches can be carried out by the ED.
Well, in fact, Samiksha, the latest details are now coming in that Mallikarjun Kharge, who's the principal officer of the Young Indian, he was essentially asked to be present at the at the Young Indian office today around 12:30. In fact, he has now appeared. After his appearance, the Enforcement Directorate will begin their searches. We can now confirm, Samiksha, that the Enforcement Directorate, and let's just put this out in our, as the breaking news that's coming in right now, that the ED will begin their searches in the National Herald case as far as Young Indian office is concerned. In fact, these searches were incomplete because earlier when the summons were basically sent out, they had categorically mentioned that they would be carrying out searches at the Young Indian office, and the principal officer, who's basically in charge of Young Indian, would have to be present. However, since Mallikarjun Kharge was not present yesterday, that is the reason why Enforcement Directorate had to basically seal that very office, which is going to be opened today, and in the presence of Mallikarjun Kharge, Enforcement Directorate will carry out searches. That's the latest news that's coming in.
Yes. Shravan, stay with us. If you could talk to us more about the Hawala angle that has also emerged. We've been talking it for past so many days now that there has been a Hawala link when we talk about the National Herald scam. If you could talk to us more about these shell companies that are also under scanner when we talk about this mega scam.
Well, in fact, Samiksha, as far as the PMLA case, as far as the National Herald case is concerned, remember, there were India searches that were carried out. This was day before yesterday, where searches were carried out in Kolkata, in Mumbai, in the national capital, and several other cities. The focus essentially was on suspicious transactions. When I say suspicious transactions, it essentially means that the Enforcement Directorate basically suspects that there have been certain Hawala entries. Hawala entries which have basically come in from cities like Kolkata and Mumbai, and that has basically come under the scanner of the Enforcement Directorate. Particularly this time in the searches, they were looking at where these entries were coming in, who are the Hawala operators, and what are the names of these very companies that were essentially used and found mentioned in the book of entries, in the book of accounts, I beg your pardon. And that's going to be important to point out here, simply because right now the focus has now shifted towards the transactions that have basically taken place. Because remember, Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi were essentially also asked this particular question about receiving about 1 crore rupees from a company which goes by the name of Dotex. However, they have not really been able to convince the Enforcement Directorate that this is a justified transaction to begin with. These are some areas that they're looking at right now. Once the searches are basically completed, perhaps the next course of action in all likelihood would be for the Enforcement Directorate to identify the properties that were essentially bought from the proceeds of crime. If they are in a position to identify that, then in all likelihood, if you simply go by the PMLA Act, then one of the options that is available before the Enforcement Directorate after the identification of the properties would be to attach the properties. Once the attachment takes place, remember, this is a civil action that is going to be taken by the Enforcement Directorate. And the procedure that is basically involved is that it puts, after the course of time, it basically is taken up before the appellate authority, and it is for the appellate authority to uphold the action action that has been taken by the Enforcement Directorate in terms of the attachment that has taken place.
Yes.
If at all an attachment is actually taken place, Samiksha, it's going to be a huge blow for the Gandhis right now, because remember, they are essentially trying to dissociate themselves from the acquisition of AJL properties on the grounds that these are decisions that were not taken by the Gandhis themselves, but rather a decision that was taken by Motilal Vora. But remember, sources within the Enforcement Directorate have said that the burden of proof essentially lies on the Gandhis to essentially convince them that it was, after all, Motilal Vora who had taken the decision and not the other way.
All right, Shravan, thank you so much for getting us all those details. So, Shravan, they're getting us all those details in relation to the National Herald scam case. We are told that Kharge, who's also been asked to appear to be present at the office where the ED will be conducting further searches in connection to the scam.